At a sunny Snetterton, we are ready for the morning warm-up session for the British GT Championship. The teams, after the endurance race at Spa, back on British soil and back to the format we had right at the very start of the season. In other words, today, the two one-hour races, qualifying for which we had yesterday under rather overcast skies and a rather damp circuit in the morning. Today, again, it's not exactly warm and it is clouding over a touch, but with a track temperature of 17 degrees, the team's given this 15-minute session to effectively do whatever they want. Bed in tyres or brakes, practice pit stops, give the AM driver a little bit more time, make sure any problems they had yesterday might now be sorted. They didn't even have to go out at all if they don't want, but the time is there for them to do whatever they wish. And for a championship that is building up very, very nicely, qualifying yesterday for the first race, put Rob Collard onto pole position, teammate Alex Martin second fastest. You look there at the Jack Brown-driven McLaren. He was third in GT4 yesterday, and it's going to be a busy first race, that is for sure, with the GT3 and GT4 battles well worth watching. And of course, we've got this. We've got Donington and Brands Hatch still to go before the end of the season. The fast lane is open. The green flag is shown. David Addison and Joe Osborne trackside. It's not a day for the sun cream, is it, Joe? But even so, the track is dry at least.
Yeah, the forecast looks slightly brighter, as I say that. You can see the sun sweeping down the pit straight. Lovely shots there. So, yeah, it's not going to be a hot one. 20 degrees, I think, peak temperature today. We saw yesterday in qualifying a higher temp than the rest of the weekend testing-wise, and some of the teams openly admitting they're struggling with setup. Rob Collard saying that as he was on pole position in this session. But, yeah, last chance for the cars to really see where the cars are all performing and where they need to maybe change that window of setup to aid the drivers over these two one-hour races.
Now, a warm-up session, I was touching on this a moment ago. You don't have to go out if you don't want. Different teams will do different things. It's very much what your run plan dictates, really. Yeah,
and Snetterton, the quirk, like here in Alton Park, because they are sprint races, no refueling, the cars come in at 45 degrees into their pit boxes because of the short nature of the pit lane. So the teams will probably have that as their highest point on their agenda, is just to do a couple of practice pit stops, make sure the timing equipment is working, that they're not going to go under the minimum pit stop time, but likewise not too far over. And it is a quirky nature, even as a driver, from my perspective. You pull the car in at 45, you see a very aggressive, I assume, Rob Collard on one of the nearies there, as we see the Paddock Motorsport. But as a driver, you've got to come in at 45, but the way the pit apron curves up, suddenly the car loses braking efficiency. And you're like, why is that? Well, if you actually see it from the outside, sometimes the front wheel picks up in the air because the cars are so stiff. And then the mechanics, four of them, have to push you back down into the fast lane. So it is super quirky and super easy to make mistakes.
Now, looking at McLaren, just to mention that Morgan Tilbrook's car has been withdrawn from today, we understand. Morgan was suffering from a painful back yesterday, so not feeling at his best. That car we're not expecting to see. It was in the pit lane this morning when the team were doing practice pit stops, but within the garage 59 garage, you've got the little rack where the drivers leave the helmets. They were there for the sister car, but empty for 77. So we understand that is not going to be seen. With the number 69, I think it is, Lotus, having had an engine change, that also is likely to end up with a grid penalty for both of the races. 22 is the BMW there that you can see of Carl Caver's Lewis Plato. And just up the road ahead, you've got number 9 of Mark Smith and Richard Neary at the wheel of number 8 Mercedes. Maxi Goetz having gone out, interestingly, in 18 Mercedes, rather than the lower graded driver Kevin Say. The Toyota Supra heading up toward the line. Dan Vaughan, GT4 champion a few years back, at the wheel, but then bails for the pit lane, comes in pretty rapidly.
Yeah, definitely caught that for Seti Aston, didn't he? So he's got a better braking point than the number 7 GT4 Aston. So again, that's all good practice for the couple of races. Any minimising of lost time is the same as finding a 10th or 2 on track. So it all adds up.
And there's the Toyota comes in. Kavi Jundu, the second driver of that car, stands in front of it, as also does Bryn Lucas.
Thanks very much, Adders. Morning, by the way, and morning to you as well, Joe. Kavi, a good qualifying session for you yesterday, for both you drivers, actually, for your qualifying sessions, respectively. You've had an up and down season. You had a decent podium a couple of rounds ago, though. So what can you do here? I mean, obviously, you've got the pace from some circuits.
Yeah, we have. I mean, the car generally has been, you know, quite a well-rounded car. We've had a bit of bad luck opening round. We had a problem with the issue. We had an issue with the throttle, so we didn't finish either race. We had some more bad luck the round after that, and we didn't finish again. So we've had 2 DNFs, which haven't helped our season, but I think we're building a bit of momentum now. Quali was good yesterday. Unfortunately had an ABS issue, which in quali, which cost me probably 2 or 3 places on the grid. But you know, from where we are, I think we can fight from there, and hopefully I can bring the car home in a good place.
The fact that these 2 separate races gives you that opportunity, doesn't it? I know Dan's in there at the moment, he's giving it a bit of a shakedown. Will you be getting out at all yourself or not?
Sorry?
Will you go out on track at all yourself or not this morning?
This morning, no, probably not. We're making a few changes from quali yesterday. We're suffering with a bit of understeer, so Dan will be out for the whole session now. Hopefully the car will be a bit better. If not, we'll go back to the setup from yesterday and we'll be racing from there.
Either way, we wish you the very best luck. Cheers. Thanks very much, Cavi. Back to you, Adders.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Kavi Jundu then, with the Toyota in the background, trying to cure this understeer that they were having yesterday. Now, this was a quick car yesterday within GT4, same category in which that Toyota runs. Aston Miller took a pole position yesterday. He's behind the wheel of the Ginetta now. Not bad for a super sub. He's been dropped into this car because Stuart Middleton is away at Goodwood doing manufacturer rides. But Aston Miller came out of Ginetta Racing, thrown back into a GT4 spec G56, and he really delivered yesterday.
Really did, yeah. Ginetta Junior Champion, as you said, so showing the Ginetta ladder works all the way up into this super fast competitive GT4 car. Used to DTO running the McLaren Artura last year for Aston Miller and Josh Rowledge, but they seem to have got on top of this Ginetta very, very quickly indeed. So Aston, by his own admission, said he did a mega job yesterday in qualifying, so nice to see he's as humble as he is fast. Car looking good. You can see, I always think the Ginetta looks very high on its ride height. You see the front of the car quite high. Again, that's just the balance of performance measures that SRO have sort of deemed to slow that Ginetta down to make it the same speed as some of the slower GT4s. It just needs to be lifted, and you can see the pitch of that car. And as a driver, it's probably the worst balance of performance tool you have against you. Is a high car just feels slow and lethargic, much like when you wake up a bit hungover, maybe tomorrow morning after the football.
Wouldn't know. Then the Ginetta up through Coram. We've got Ricky Carlisle, the quickest in the session, by the way, 1:47.2. Some drivers going out just doing a series of installation laps, letting the team gain some data. The clock ticks on down. We're roughly at halfway, nearly enough. 8.5 minutes on the clock. The Ginetta heads for the pit road as well. And remember that the 2 drivers will start a race each. It's the race they qualified for yesterday. They're one of the Lotus Emiras across the timing line. That's number 20, which currently has Ian Duggan behind the wheel of it, and 78, Sandy Mitchell, who was an absolute star yesterday in qualifying. He's behind the wheel of this car that he shares with Alex Martin, the only combination to have had 2 GT3 wins this year. Yeah, they've been strong, and his qualifying yesterday was mega. Obviously, he's on pole position, but the thing I still take away from that was doing it on his sick flying lap as we go on board now on the 78 car, nearly getting out of his way, giving us the clear line under the bridge. Let's just watch how tight you can get it to the bollards on the left, use the curb, and then launch it into the right, not over the sausage. That's perfect. Just hear the curbs rumbling as he flat through the bomb hole. Just breathing out of the throttle. That may be because he's on used tyres, might be full of fuel to simulate the start of the race, how the car's going to feel through Coram. You can see him nice and smooth on the wheel, under the braking. What's the car doing? Still a little lively, brings it in, good traction. Couldn't hear any traction control at all, so able to get that sort of 550 horsepower. And let's have a look at the pit lane. White line now, you have to be doing 40 kilometres an hour, 10k slower than some of the tracks we go to because of the tight nature. They're the first garage here on the right. Stop at the board, and off we go. Looks like they're going to do probably a driver change. Just couldn't see, Martin. Actually, a rear wing change going on there. Is that the BMW, the Century car, though? I think it is. Nathan Freak in the background on the pit wall. So obviously looking, it looks like they're taking wing off. The wing looked like it was going flatter rather than higher. So they're obviously thinking, got a pretty strong rear here. You can see the wind, the flag's cracking in the background. So potentially a bit more headwind going down that back straight by the looks of it. So the easiest way to overtake people is in a straight line. So if you can trim out a bit of top speed, it's a nice thing to have as a driver. And get that work done now rather than have to worry about it on the grid, for example. At least this is giving the teams the opportunity to see what today's conditions are like. There, the GT4 equivalent goes out in the background. That's Ian Goff, I think, at the wheel of it. He brought the car in, at least. And there the Carl Cavers Lewis Plato GT3 example drops down. And Century Motorsport champions last year, remember, with Darren Lung and Dan Harper, get that car back on track. 18 is now Kevin Say at the wheel of it, the driver from Macau, over the line.
I think, did Maxi Götz do the time of 47.9, or was that Kevin Say? Because if that was Kevin, that's quicker than he went in qualifying yesterday, so I assume it must have been Götz at the start of the session.
Yeah, I think it was his one flying lap, and then he pitted, and now Kevin Say has just finished an outlap.
Yeah,
yes.
It does show you, though, doesn't it? Like, we're so used to the AMs being super close, but I was actually surprised on the gap between the AMs yesterday being over 2.5 seconds from pole in both their sessions. So Maxi Götz in one flyer could go quicker than Kevin Say goes in qualifying, and that's not to belittle the AMs. It just shows the tight, twisty nature of Snetterton, that it's not an easy circuit to maximise the lap time out of it, basically.
That graphic, just to reiterate, showing you what the pit stop compensation times are going to be for race 1, based on the top 3 in the 2 categories at Spa. So 10 seconds will go to this car, which won at Spa, Kevin Say and Maxi Götz. So whatever happens in stint 1, they've got to try and pull out 10 seconds. 7 seconds go to number 59, that's the McLaren Adam Smalley and Sean Balfe, and 5 seconds to the Collards Lamborghini. And within GT4, it's the same principle, 10 seconds to number 29, BMW of Wrigley and Goff. 47 gets the 7 seconds. That's Mark Warren, Will Orton's Mercedes, and 5 seconds go the way of the Mikey Porter, Jamie Day, Aston Martin. But in GT4, if you are a silver-silver pairing, therefore in the Silver Cup, there's an extra 14 seconds you've got to serve. Maxi Götz there, out of the car. You talk about how the difference is between the Pro and the AM. Bear in mind, of course, Maxi Götz as a Mercedes factory driver is in one of these cars pretty much every weekend. Different teams, but around the globe. He can be jumping from British, maybe to a German, to a World Challenge. Can be a sprint like this as a 1 hour, or a full endurance race. You know, a factory driver, barely does a weekend go by without you being behind the wheel of the car somewhere around the globe.
Yeah, it's never a fair comparison, but to have it as your yardstick for Kevin Say in this example is perfect, because there's nothing that's not being turned over in the pursuit of performance. And yeah, Kevin Say will happen to be working. It's really been tight, hasn't it, this GT4 pack here? I think because the GT4s this year have just gone that little bit quicker again. The gaps are smaller, and Ian Loggy can see his car being hustled around by Phil Keane, hoping that he doesn't have to buy a €6,000 new splitter before the race has even started. But now Phil has worked his way through those couple of GT4 cars, can get a couple of corners clear. But again, this is going to be a great illustration of what these guys are going to get during the race when they catch the GT4s up. And
that was 95 McLaren of Callum Davis that so nearly got in the way. So in this very charismatic D2 colour scheme that takes you back to the late 90s, Mercedes of both the DTM and also FIA GT, Phil Keane pressing on. Still perhaps doesn't get the credit that he deserves, despite the fact that, along with Johnny Adam, he's had more British GT race wins than anybody else. But the title still eludes Phil Keane, which seems deeply unfair. Yeah, it's just his demeanour, doesn't he? He's such a down-to-earth character. I think sometimes if he put his shoulders up a bit and put an O on the end of his surname, he'd sound a lot faster and get more drives. But no, Phil really is a mega driver. All-round raced against him for years, raced with him couple of times as well. Lovely guy. But yeah, second in qualifying yesterday as well, so I think he'll be happy. Second isn't always the worst place to be here at Snetterton, because it is the outside, but you do then get free rein in the first 2 corners to go a bit deep on the brakes and try and get a run on the inside cars that do have the advantage. But it's not the worst place to be, I don't think. So there, over the timing line goes Phil Keane, and Ian Loggy looks on. His expression never gives much away, does it? Ian Loggy, who has been a very prolific racer since he came into the sport. And again, whether it's racing in radicals in the Middle East in the winter or GT categories during the summer months, he's always a busy character. And Phil Keane behind the wheel of the 2Cs Motorsport Run Mercedes, the Anglo-Bahraini team, and you're riding with him then as they now work their way out of Parma and on towards Agostini down to turn 4. Looking nice, the car, isn't it? Front engine, so when being on board of the Lambo, that's the engine behind you. So you've got a longer front end, but normally that weight helps the front tuck in. You can hear how patient Phil is on the throttle, not to create any understeer
on exit as we go to the Lamborghini. Now Rob Collard in pole position in his session, the only AM driver in the 47s. He looked quick all day and he converted that. He's on a real run at the moment, I think, and he's getting more and more used to this GT racing. We spoke about a lot yesterday where his past has been, but I don't think I've seen an AM look at home as much as he is currently in a GT car.
Although you forget that he's now done quite a bit of GT racing. It's 2020 that he was the British champion. So, you know, he's done a lot of miles, and perhaps this type of racing is now very much more for Rob, because you get so much mileage over the course of a weekend rather than just 3 short races, as was always the way in touring cars. Ricky Collard coming into British GT this year, but of course he's been a race winner in the past in GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Cup, and will get himself ready on the next pit stop. The flag's going to be out, so I think all they'll do is a practice driver change here. Rob Collard in the traffic. Got that BMW, the GT4 spec car ahead, out of the Century stable, and Rob doesn't commit to the inside line because he can see how busy it is up the road, so I suspect he will bail this time, get this practice pit stop done, and he comes.
Yeah, down to 40k by the white line. Like again, they're the very first garage, because we saw Sandy Mitchell take the green pit board here on the left. We're the orange one on the right, so slightly easier to maybe get the car in. Belt's going up on a magnet on the roll cage there for the right one. You can see Ricky in a very aggressive stance there to get in 2 different seat inserts. Quite rare that normally, because normally one would be the base and you put an insert inside the base seat. So obviously they're not able to get comfy. That's why Belt's being done. That was quick. Window net already going in. That looked like a well sub 20-second driver change.
And it's interesting watching that, because on more than one occasion in the past there has been a drama within a Barwell Collard pit stop where Rob, in the heat of the moment, has got cables in the wrong place, or something's, you know, dropped the wrong side of the hands device, and it just loses a little bit of time, and there has to be that calm and okay, now how do I move that? But in the panic you can make it worse, can't you? So these practice pit stops, always a good idea.
Yeah, massively. It's so important to do it in a live scenario as well, because do it in the garage calm, things don't go wrong, but when you are flustered, that's where you need to realise what goes wrong, what procedure do we need to change. They had fired the car up, even though the checker flag was out, so they might just literally practice the pushback and then just drive back, but that is session done, and that car does top the timing sheets.
Indeed so, as the rest will take the checkered flag. This gives us a chance to identify 1 or 2 more that we didn't see really in the session. Alex Martin took over number 78, 8 Sam Neary at the very end of the session. You can see how busy a racetrack it is, with over 30 cars heading into race day, even allowing for the withdrawal of the McLaren of Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Klassen. Number 17 there is the Harry George, Luca Hopkinson Mercedes out of GT4, which is, I think I'm right in saying, the fastest GT4 car this morning. Yes, it is, and a good effort being put in there by the pair of them.
You can see it in front of its bigger sister GT3 Mercedes as well. Ram this weekend have got Max Hesse in the car alongside John Ferguson, Marcello on other duties, so be interesting to see how Max Hesse gets on. Super fast in everything he does, but never in British GT, never at Snetterton. So
never in the UK, as far as we can work out.
Wow.
Don't think he's ever raced in the UK either, so it's all a bit of a...
At least Brexit's working.
Yeah, that's true.
Keeping all these foreign drivers away, stealing my drives.
He's quick as well, did I mention that? Yeah. So into the pit lane they come, and there is 22, the Carl Cavers and Lewis Plato currently driven BMW, another out of the Century Motorsports stable. The Academy Motorsport Mustang just going through shot with a new red, white and blue colour scheme reflected across both cars. And Lewis Plato, we've seen racing in GT, we've seen him in Porsches, seen him in Radicals. He will bring this car to the end of the session. So it's always very hard to know exactly what to read into the warm-up session, because different teams are trying different things. But Adam Smalley, right at the very end, putting number 59 McLaren up to 2nd in the times. Rob Collard then, the fastest. Adam Smalley 2nd and Maxi Goetz 3rd, ahead of Sandy Mitchell and then Johnny Adam. The Max Hesse, John Ferguson BMW 6th, ahead of Tom Gamble and Mark Radcliffe's McLaren. Phil Keane 8th, ahead of Mark Smith, and then Sam Neary for Team ABBA Racing right at the very end. As far as GT4 is concerned, right at the very end, a change there as well. Gordy Much going fastest for Mahiki Racing in the Emira that he shares with Ian Duggan. 2nd in GT4, Luca Hopkinson and Harry George, and 3rd, Seb Morris and Charles Dawson. And a little bit further down the Blackthorn Aston not going out. Tim Docker, Jordan Alberts, GT4 Audi, penultimate in the times. But as I say, don't worry too much about that. Different teams doing different things on their round plan within the warm-up session. They will take to the track next at 11:25 for the first of the two races. And the cars will head to the grid a little bit before that, but 11:25 is when the race starts. We'll have all the action here for you a little bit later on in the day. And the second race, 4:20 this afternoon. It's a very busy programme, largely with Ginettas as the support package, but also GB4 racing here this weekend and the local Saloon Car Championship. But 11:25, British GT Championship, race 1 will blast off, and it should be a very interesting and frenetic 60-minute race. Very much a 60-minute sprint these days. So Ron Collard tops the times in the warm-up and will start race 1 from pole position. We'll see whether that in turn translates into a second victory of the season. 11:25, the action will be here. Join us later in the morning.